I mean, we see that time wears things down. And in the Vedic time cycle, so you have a time period of 4,332,000 years, which repeats in a cycle. So you get a golden age, and then a silver age, then the copper bronze age, and then the iron age, and that repeats itself. And the ages are characterized by a degradation of human qualities. So in the Vedic system, it's understood that there's 4 basic human principles: truthfulness, simple living, cleanliness and purity, and loving kindness. And these are systematically degraded. Now in the Iron Age, the last principle left is truthfulness, and that's really on its last legs. So truthfulness, so for example, modern material society is built on a lie. What is the lie? The lie is that there's only matter, that life doesn't exist. You know, I'm just brainwaves in a highly evolved material system. I mean, basically, there's no difference between me and a clod of earth. Not really. It's a more evolved clod. This is a lie. It's obviously a lie because, you know, I'm looking at 2 video cameras here, and video cameras don't come together by themselves. The living force does something that Earth can't do, matter can't do. We do miracles, and the universe itself is a miracle. We're looking at a world of miracles, and modern material science just cuts out the miraculous. The only miracle is, aren't we great that we can discover all these things? The supreme miraculous is the intelligence of modern scientists. It's grim.
So we could say it's a symptom of the effect of time that modern society has fallen into a degraded condition, that it's not the fault of any particular group of people, it's just...
No, I wouldn't say that.
It's just...
By the influence of time, different groups of people take on particular degraded qualities. So there are interest groups. For example, if people are more spiritual, they'll be more intelligent, they'll understand that they've been lied to, they'll understand that really they don't need all this, you know, paraphernalia of modern society. Not only they'll understand, but by becoming satisfied spiritually, they just go beyond all that. Don't need it. So then modern consumerism comes to a halt. One minister of education in Russia, he said, we don't need creative people, we need qualified consumers. So there are different interest groups. I mean, there's economic interest groups, political interest groups, like the Romans, for example. They systematically wiped out the Druids. But then there's also religious interest groups. So the Christians, for example, in Russia and in this country, I don't know where else, they've systematically eradicated the traces of the previous culture. The devil in Christian, what do you call it? In there, actually, it's Shivji. You see, the devil's got horns. That's Shivji with the moon on his head, and
Lord Shiva with the trident.
Yeah, with the trident.
He's been
and the snakes.
Okay.
So the previous god becomes the demon in the next group, in the next religion. And the Christians, they systematically built their churches on the sacred worship sites. So we can understand where they were from, you know, where the churches were.
So it would appear to me that the central principle of our modern civilization, the bottom line is, whichever group of people happens to possess the most money, guns,
power,
manpower, and media influence gets to dictate policy to everybody else.
Not only gets to dictate policy, but gets to dictate the, you know, accepted truth. What is the paradigm on which society rests? Up until the Middle Ages, the governing paradigm here in Europe or here in UK was the paradigm of the church. And then that was beaten down. I mean, especially Henry VIII, he shattered that. And then you get the paradigm of money. Originally you had, in the Vedic society, the the society was based on knowledge. So there's 4 processes in a society. There's education, leadership, production and maintenance of resources, and working. These 4. And in the Vedic society, you've got 4 basic classes, groups. You've got the spiritual teachers, you've got the leaders, you've got the farmers and bankers, and you've got the workers. So in the Vedic time, the actual power, the real influence, not power so much, but the real influence, was coming from knowledge. And at the beginning of Kali Yuga, that was destroyed. So then the kings come into power. And you can see in this country that the last vestiges of sacred knowledge, that was up until, like, John had to sign the Magna Carta, that was the barons coming into power, and then Henry VIII, he really dissolved the power of the church, the sacred authority. So then you had the power of the kings, James with his divine right of kings, but that was superseded by the merchants in the civil wars here. And then with the uprising like the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution, Bolshevik Revolution, then you get the power of the workers. So in every society there's a governing paradigm, and whoever has the power propagates the paradigm. But now the point with the Vedic principles is that they're self-evident and they're undeniable, and they're anyway appearing. So groups of people, individuals and groups of people, are coming to understand the Vedic principles naturally, anyway. And then also, people are beginning to decode, in the last, 30, 40, 50 years, people have begun to decode the secrets in Stonehenge, the secrets in the earth, like the London stars, the megalithic tradition, Jerusalem, the Mayan culture, and so on. And, you know, the jigsaw pieces are beginning to come together. And we're getting this picture of an original worldwide civilization, culture, and that's the essence of that is still preserved in India. Although India is also degraded, phenomenally degraded. But the essence is there, and in other parts of the world also. Russia, for example. I travel a lot in Russia, and the Russian Veda, there's a lot of interest in Russia in the Vedas. There is a Russian Veda, and some Russian enthusiasts say that the Indian culture came from the Indian Veda came from the Russian Veda. I wouldn't like to say that, because Sanskrit language is so far in advance of the Russian language and the culture and so on. But in various places in the world, this old culture is again coming into its own.
So coming back to London, even though it would appear from history that most of religion has really been the power of the state extended in the name of religion, it does seem that also some very extraordinary esoteric and spiritual principles have been preserved in a hidden way, and the Bible comes to a happy ending where it says that Babylon, or materialistic, godless civilization, reaches a point of collapse, and then there's a renewal, a revelation. This is in the book of Revelation, that a new Jerusalem descends. It says, like a bride adorned for her husband, a new state of consciousness, and it actually describes a geometric model in the book of Revelation, which appears to be borne out by the exact patterns that we find in the London landscape. So it would appear that something very extraordinary is happening, that there does appear to be a massive renewal, like people are taking up. There's 15 million people now practicing yoga in America. There's yoga is being practiced in our schools these days. Even on television, I just recently heard children are sitting around in circles chanting Om on children's BBC. So these are all extraordinary signs that people are actually embracing the values and standards of this ancient culture. And could I just ask you about I think a lot of people are somewhat confused about what's the role of our royalty. What is the royal order meant to do? This is the Queen's. We have a stable royal family. This is the Queen's Jubilee year, her 60th year, but it would appear that they just seem to have established a role of hereditary privilege. But what are the royal order actually meant to do?
In Vedic society was based on basically the interaction between the saintly teachers, sacred teachers, and the sacred kings. So there's three basic principles. You've got the principle of work according to inborn ability. You've got the principle of, that's called varna. Then you've got the principle of acting out values born on one's innate situation, like male has particular nature, female has particular nature. The different classes have their innate natures, and Vedic society is designed so that all of those interact to make a cohesive, harmonious whole. And the king maintains that sacred order in society, so the whole of society, not only of people, but of living creatures, even apparently non-living creatures like mountains, oceans, rivers and everything, they're all it's a harmonious whole, and everything is working to satisfy the Supreme. So the responsibility of royalty is to maintain that sacred order under the direction of the saintly teachers, and the saintly teachers curb the materialistic tendency of the kings. Because kings are powerful, and they're naturally very passionate. So the saintly teachers, they curb the materialistic tendencies of the royalty. And then the royalty, they curb the materialistic tendencies of the merchants. And the merchants, they look after the workers. Like this. So there's a pyramid of responsibility. That has broken down now. Because somehow or other we've got this introduction of virtual money that really doesn't exist. And somehow or other, I mean, you could trace it historically. So the merchant class has risen, so-called merchant class, or banker class, has risen into ascendancy. And the royalty, everybody, the politicians, the teachers, everyone, they're playing the games of the money people. So society's going to hell. It's gone to hell. The royalty can only perform its function when there is a class of saintly teachers who can act as consultants and guides to royalty. Otherwise, yeah, people have an innate tendency to worship somebody or other, to admire somebody or other, and royalty is great. There's not... Now, there's, like, for example, I'll give a simple example, Dalai Lama commands a tremendous amount of respect from a very, very wide range of people. So there is an innate tendency to honor, like, the sacred teachers, because he's seen, I suppose, not necessarily so much as a religious head. I would guess that there's probably worldwide, well, the Pope, I suppose, he might be a good example of somebody who's got reverence worldwide. But the Dalai Lama, his influence is across religious boundaries. The Pope, for example, would be especially reverenced by Roman Catholics, not necessarily by people from other religions. Like, for example, if the head patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church came to London, I don't know how many people would turn out to see him. But if the Dalai Lama came, there'd be people from all sorts of walks of life would come, because he's not just a religious leader, but he's like a spiritual teacher. That's just one example. So people do have this tendency to honor eminent personalities. So now that's transferred to royalty, because in this country anyway, they're the most conspicuous eminent personalities. But they're not performing the function of Vedic royalty. In fact, it's difficult to see what exactly... They have a kind of ritual function, but other than that, it's difficult to see what function they do perform.
Yeah, a lot of people resent them. There's a move towards republicanism, getting rid of the royal family or whatever, but it would appear that many people also have high regard for them, that they are here to stay. They're fabulously wealthy and powerful anyway. They're not about to give up their position. Do you think the situation could be resolved if the present royal family just simply took on the traditional values?
There's no possibility of that.
There's no possibility of it?
No. I mean, you see what happened to John Kennedy when he tried to change the values of the state. Anyone who goes against the the actual hidden authority structure finished.
Okay, given that in the Bible it's saying that the present structure as it is, this godless sort of money worshipping system that we follow, that it actually just collapses overnight. That's how it describes it in the book of Revelation. It says it collapses in a matter of hours, I believe, and it's renewed. What are we likely? I mean, how is that transition going to happen on a practical level? Is it just the citizens? We all as individuals need to take up more truth-based spiritual values to bring about a meaningful transition.
It's like I said before. For example, the ecological footprint of modern society is bigger than the Earth, so it's going to go, and anyone who's part of that, who's dependent on that, is going to go. The Earth can't support that population of consumers. So there will be a transition. I mean, some people might think there's going to be a Deus ex machina, God's going to come down and wave a magic wand and everything's going to be okay. But I would see a more naturalistic transition where people who are embodying the wisdom, the old wisdom, Wicca, the ancient wisdom, Vedic wisdom, they'll develop more and more, they'll become more cohesive on the one hand. The false economic system, I mean, it's certain to collapse soon. People who are part of that are going to suffer and die. But there will be groups worldwide of people who can survive and bring the ancient wisdom more and more. Behind the collapse of the modern economic system, then you've got whoever it is who's manipulating the whole thing. They've got their thing going.